So today I would like to talk about the indigenous peoples and local communities under the agenda item of the Article 8Js and the program of work. So did you know that IPLCs manage half of the world's land under the traditional practice? So this land is crucial for sustaining a significant portion of global biodiversity, yet only about 10% of it is formally protected. So basically, IPLCs often inhabit regions teeming with both biological and cultural diversity. So it's a home to plant and animal species as well as numerous languages. So their close relationships with these ecosystems means that any changes to biodiversity laws can significantly impact within the IPLCs. So therefore, it's very essential, for them to be well informed about biodiversity related laws, policies, regulations, so they can actively participate in initiatives like the Convention on Biological Diversity. So in the data, the IPBES Global Assessment Report, approximately the 25% of the world's land is traditionally owned or utilized by indigenous people. So which includes about 35% of protected areas that remain largely untouched by human activity. However, I mean, the sad truth is that as ecosystem is disrupt, the traditional ways of life that's so because language and invaluable knowledge they accompany being disrupted as the ecosystem also being devastated. So for thousands of years, indigenous communities have been stewards for a wide variety of species, contributing to the rich biodiversity what we enjoy today. So their perspectives on sustainability emphasize a very holistic relationship with nature because they become so adept at nurturing species diversity that the lines between domesticated and wild yeah, so despite their critical contributions, we have seen that IPLCs face numerous challenges, right, including to rights violation, land depossession, and the ongoing loss of biodiversity either. So the remnants of colonialism also continue to shape their rights and livelihoods, right? Because it's further disrupting the biodiversity. So therefore, adopting a rights-based approach when we discussing IPLCs and biodiversity conservation, it's very critical and also essential to ensure their voices are heard and their rights are respected. So when we talk about the human right-based approach, we also need to see and look at the IPLCs are deeply intertwined with the loss of biodiversity and cultural heritage. So this crisis stems, I mean, from the unsustainable global systems that shape our resources valuation and governance and also consumption patterns. So there's an uneven power dynamic in decision making that negatively impacts both natural and local communities. So when we look at that root causes, we find a very troubling separation of humanity from nature, compounded by the profit-driven motivations that often conflicts. So this detachment leads to the decline of biodiversity and ecosystems, which actually rely on the our stewardship to flourish. So however, unfortunately, that nature is often viewed merely as a resource for exploitation, right? So with its a very deterioration seen as mere consequence of routine business practice. We all know that. So the symptoms of this problem manifest in issues like deforestation, land degradation, overfishing, and pollution. So all of which contribute to the very larger biodiversity and climate crisis we face today. So the rise of IPLCs are often sidelined by government policies, resulting in their marginalization and discrimination. So this scenario raises concerns about green colonialism, that some conservation organizations from the global north may inadvertently perpetuate colonial power structures by sidelining indigenous knowledge and failing to engage with local communities in a very meaningful ways. So this is not only undermines a very effective biodiversity conservation, but also neglects the voices of those who have long been caretakers of these ecosystems. So um, as for example, that as new protected areas establish, the rights and welfare of IPLCs are frequently overlooked, often framing that as the problem rather than the partners in conservation. So to move forward, we also have to rethink our conservation strategies to prioritize the rights of IPLCs, ensuring their inclusion while simultaneously addressing the biodiversity loss, because it's very important to sustain very effective nature conservation. So let's also talk about the perspective of the contributions and challenges by the indigenous people and local communities. So there may be a very wide variety of perspectives that we can bring up, but today I just want to talk about a very few that is very prior to our discussions. So our essential concept is also to consider the intergenerational equity, right, which refers to the responsibility we have to ensure the future generations inherit a very healthy planet. So this principle is recognized by the Convention on Biological Diversity and resonates deeply with the IPLCs, who believe in the importance of passing down natural resources in a very sustainable manner. So as a result, indigenous youth are stepping up to lead conservation initiatives, but to effectively contribute, they also have to have a seat in the decision-making table, not just to express their views, but to influence to the policies meaningfully in a very direct way. So despite their eagerness to participate, indigenous youth often encounter very significant barriers. Within their communities, there may be struggle against power dynamics and traditional hierarchies, and that marginalize their voices. On also the national and global stages, the obstacles only multiply. So, many indigenous youth lack the necessary resources, access, and funding to engage in biodiversity discussions and climate action, etc. So issues such as language barriers and cultural differences that further hinder their involvement, leading to inclusion rather than genuine consideration of their insights. So empowering indigenous youth is not merely an act of goodwill, it is a very matter of justice also. So to find a very sustainable solutions for biodiversity and climate, we also have to acknowledge their unique perspectives that integrate traditional knowledge with very modern approaches. So providing them with adequate support, with funding resources or some alternative opportunities to influence policies, it's very crucial. Many young people struggle to connect with their cultural heritage and learn from their elders. So factors such as urbanization, migration, language barriers, and societal pressures to assimilate can dispute the transmission of traditional knowledge. So those kind of supports are also very critical. So another thing is the funding. So another significant challenge facing NPOs is also the funding, because despite their essential role in conservation biodiversity, securing financial resources also can be a very incredibly difficult, because at the last COP26, a pledge of 1.7 billion was made to support indigenous-led conservation initiatives. However, in a research that revealed that only 7% of that funding reached to indigenous organizations. So much of it became a very bureaucratic processes, or like failed to align with the actual needs of these communities, because like funding mechanisms are often rigid, making it challenging for IPLCs to make them to their specific circumstance. So indigenous women also in particular like frequently find themselves excluded from land and forest governance discussions and compounding these issues. That's also a very crucial thing, direct access to the funding. And also another point is the land rights. So the situation, why the UN acknowledged that significance of IPLCs controlling their lands many face a very stacked realities where their rights are unrecognized because conservation targets like those outlined in CBD's Target 3 often prioritize the protection of areas while neglecting the rights of the communities that inhabit them. So it's very essential for IPLCs to have their collective land rights recognized and governed according to their systems. But unfortunately, conservation efforts can sometimes displace IPLCs from their territories under the pretext of the biodiversity protection, intensifying the injustice they face. So this point are very also crucial because IPLCs can also be discriminated under the topic of the conservation. Um, for example, in Burma, in my country, indigenous and customary rights have yet to be officially acknowledged at the national level. So this recognition is very critical if we are to build a grassroots federal system in the country. Without it, that communities like those in the Sandon Peace part from the eastern part of Burma are at risk of dispossession, which poses a very significant threat to the biodiversity that indigenous peoples have secured for generations. So what's the takeaway? Because for the CBD to be effective and justice, it must prioritize not only biodiversity, but also the rights and needs of IPLCs, particularly indigenous young people. So this entails ensuring proper funding, genuine inclusion in decision-making process, and respect for their land and governance systems. Without those elements, any progress made in biodiversity conservation will remain unproductive. This is very straightforward. So, okay, we dive into the very foundations of the IPLCs, right? So let's talk about the Convention on Biological Diversity and also the IPLCs. So let's start with the Article 8J first. So this article underscores the very important respecting, preserving, and maintaining the traditional knowledge and practice of indigenous local communities. These practices are not just cultural activists, they are key to conserving biodiversity, but the articles go beyond mere acknowledgement. So it emphasizes the need for active promotion of this knowledge with the consent and engagement of IPLCs. It ensures that any benefits arising from the utilization of this traditional knowledge are equitably shared. In essence, that the article advocates for integrating IPLC insights into the biodiversity efforts while ensuring they have a seat at the table and receive fair compensation. And also, we also have Article 10C, which focus on the sustainable use of biodiversity. So this one highlights the significance of customary practice among IPLCs regarding the biological resources. So it calls for the encouragement and protection of their traditional land use methods, provided um, they align with broader conservation objectives. Rather than imposing modern or top-down conserving strategies, the CBD recognized that many of the IPLC's practice are inherently sustainable and should be supported. So this approach not only honors their relationship with the land, but also contributes to effective biodiversity management. Yeah, so that's a very overview of the CBD and IPLCs. So how decisions are made in under the CBD. So on a very the conference of the parties, the COVE, it's the primary decision-making body that has authority to establish the temporary groups such as working groups and committees to address a very specific issues. These groups operate under the COVE's guidance regarding their duration and responsibilities. So a very one noteworthy group is that ad hoc working group on Article 8J, which centers on the traditional knowledge and practices of IPLCs and their role in biodiversity conservation. So this group traced back to the COP3 in 1996, where IPLC traditional knowledge was very first acknowledged. This led to the establishment of the working group to dive deeper into how this knowledge can contribute to conservation efforts. So at the same time, representatives from the IPLCs formed the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity, providing a very vital platform for the CBD framework because the working group on Article 8J co-chairs It's meeting with both government representatives and indigenous representatives, ensuring that IPLCs actively participate in discussions. So for now, there's a very ongoing debate that about whether to make the working group on Article 8J a permanent feature of the CBD or not. If it is approved, they could ensure ongoing focus on IPLC rights and traditional knowledge in biodiversity conservation. Yeah, so there's also participatory process of the IPLCs in the CBD because participation is very essential for ensuring their voice are heard. So first and foremost, there's a registration that IPLCs can officially register as participants at CBD meetings, ensuring their perspectives are recognized basically from the very beginning. And we also have, let's see, co-chair rules that IPLCs can nominate representatives to co-chair meetings, allowing to influence agenda and discussions directly. And also, let's see, we also have the voluntary fund mechanism. Voluntary fund mechanism exists to support the MPLC's participation, especially for those from the developing countries and small island states. So this is basically supporting the financial and also facilitating to participate at the CBD meetings. Yeah, so that's basically what the CBD and the IPLCs look like. So this is the guidelines and tools that the Article 8G has already been achieved. We can also see that there's for example, plan of action on customary sustainable use of biological diversity, etc. So let's see, this is the program of work. So this program of work is the old one, where we can see about the objective and principles. This is a very straightforward. So this is a kind of objective is saying that the promotion of the implementation of Article 8G and related provisions under the local, national, and regional level to ensure a very full and effective participation of IPLCs at all stakes. And also principle, it's we have full and effective participation, traditional knowledge should be valued, a holistic approach and ecosystem approach, stuff like that. So this is the old program of work. But for now, we are about to go to the new program of work that is prepared to propose at the CBD COP 16. So the new program walk is basically about the aligning with the KMGBF Global Biodiversity Framework. So we have the specifically the global targets for the new program of work, target 1, 2, 3, 5, 9, 13, 19, 21, 22. So basically this is a very target 3, a very popular one, 30 by 30 conservation, and target 29, 22, which is full and effective participation IPLC, and also human right based approach, right? So basically that is what the overview of the program of work. So new program of work is so we have the objective, principle, and elements. So objectives is basically of the implementation of Article 8J that align with the KMGBF. So principle, it's also a very free, equitable, inclusive, effective. Traditional knowledge should be valued, holistic approach, ecosystem approach, and also ethic, free, prior, and informed consents. And also we also have the elements that is for the text for the program of work. So we have element 1 to let's see 8. So we are not about going to talk about those kind of element very and very specific. So we are just going to the overview. So we have element 1, conservation restoration, which includes the target 3, very important. And also we have element 9 and 8, sorry, element 7 and 8, which is the human rights-based approach, and also the direct access of funding to the IPOCs, and element 6, when effective participation. So yeah, that's basically of the IPLC's Article 8J new program of work to be discussed at the COP 16. So what will we discuss at the COP 16 specifically? So we have the very first one, in-depth dialogue on Article 8J. So firstly, there will be an in-depth dialogue and on the role of language in passing on the traditional knowledge across generations. So at the 12th meeting of the ad hoc open-ended intersessional working group on Article 8J, this topic was a very key focus because it acknowledged that the language plays a vital role in ensuring the continuity of traditional practice and knowledge systems. And also the COP16 will review the recommendation 12.1, which was adopted during the previous meeting. So this recommendation contains the theme for the next round of dialogue. And also we have, as I said previously, development of a new program of work for Article 8J. So the second major point of focus is that development of a new program of work for Article 8J. So this new program will align with the goals of the KMGPF, basically, and it's being developed with the full and effective participation of MPLCs. So to advance this, that a meeting of the ad hoc, the technical expert group on the new program of work and institutional arrangements was held in Brazil in July 2023. So this meeting resulted in recommendation 12.2, which will be discussed at the COP16. So at COP16, delegates will need to decide on the future institutional arrangements for the Article 8J program, including the operational structures and how best to ensure IPLC's involvement moving forward. Yeah, so and also recommendations from the Permanent Forum on IPL's Indigenous issues. So the COP16 will also review the recommendations made by the Permanent Forum on Indigenous issues during the 12th meeting of the Working Group on Article 8J. The recommendations 12.5 was adopted based on the input from the forum. So this recommendation emphasizes a very key actions that need to be taken to ensure the rights and priorities of IPLCs. And yeah, so the summary of key discussions for the COP16 is we have the role of language, the intergenerational transition of traditional knowledge, and the new program of work to be proposed, and its alignment with the KMGPF, and institutional arrangement, and also recommendation from the Permanent Forum on Indigenous issues. Yeah, so that is basically what this COP16 will be discussed about the agenda item, the Article 8J. And yeah, so this is discussion on the new program of work, which is mainly focusing on element one, including the target 3, 30 by 30. So in our discussions, this is what we touch on some critical concerns about the other effective conservation measurements, OECM, because especially how it can affect on the Indigenous people and local communities, that ensuring IPLC's full and effective participation in decision-making process or not, that addressing concerns over the externally defined standards that could disproportionately affect the IPLCs, that how OECM could be safeguarding against the political displacement or violations of IPLC rights, and also the need for the capacity building and support to enable IPLCs to manage their territories with biodiversity frameworks, right? So these considerations are very critical as we move forward with discussions on the Article 8 and IPLC at the COP16. Um, yeah, so basically, it is very critical for us to consider the OECM framework and also the IPLC engagement that can, whether it is having the human rights and also full and effective participation of IPLCs or not. Yeah, so how we could ensure human rights and indigenous people rights remain very strong in our positions in the negotiations, especially when it comes to the OECM framework. Yeah, this is a very critical and also crucial. And yeah, so this is the end of the presentations. Thank you for your attention.